Welcome to the Church of Now podcast, where we believe kids and students and young adults can make a difference now in the moment. We don't just ask them to be the future of the church, but we believe that they are the church of now. We're going to be talking with ministry leaders about what it looks like to inspire and tell young adults and kids and students what it looks like to make a difference now in the church. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey, welcome to the Church of Now podcast. We have Josh Clark here on the podcast. I'm super excited. I got to know Josh a couple of years ago at an FCA camp. I was in high school. He was investing into the high school students, and then we got to know each other. You know, we lived in the Knoxville area together for a while, and got to do some different things together, travel and go to some conferences together, and always been a guy that I can count on. So, Josh, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, man. Shout out to the FCA days. That's a good time.
Right.
High school Matt. That's wonderful. Yeah, man. So I am a student pastor in the Little Rock, Arkansas area, specifically at a church called Fellowship Bible Church, multi-site church. I am the student pastor at one of our campuses, specifically our Midtown campus, and more of our downtown campus. I'm a guy who I'm repping Maine today. My whole family's from Maine, but I was born in LA and then I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I'm all over.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know that you were in Maine and LA. That's crazy.
Yeah. Whole family's from up there. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. So you told us that you're a student pastor in Little Rock, which is actually, hey, you're the first Arkansas person on the podcast. You might be the only Arkansas person I know, other than some family members that are pretty distant.
I mean, before I moved there, same. I was the only.
That's funny. So tell us about your ministry. What does that look like for you? What does your student ministry look like? And then this is kind of a two-part question. Tell us about your ministry. I guess that's not a question, but tell us about your ministry. And then what do you feel like your students need to hear right now?
Yeah, man. So kind of the structure of our student ministry is I am a campus guy, right? So I have Wednesday night regular services. We have, D groups, discipleship groups, small groups. Huge surprise. Most churches have those things kind of going on. I operate on a multi-site team, but it's not the kind of thing where we have leadership that oversees all of our student ministry. And then we do things like for sermon series. We're on the same sermon series across all of our campuses. Yeah. We have 4 campuses that have a student ministry called FSM, Fellowship Student Ministries. Yeah. And so we do things like, all of our curriculum is going to be the same for our small groups, for our D groups. But then for a sermon series, we kind of band together, decide the sermon series for the whole year. And then one of our team will head up the sermon series and kind of give a good outline of hey, this is where I'm going to go. And we can follow along this outline. And sometimes we're hey, this is something that we should all be on the same page as to how we communicate this to our students. And then other times we're okay, well, we're doing a series in Hebrews. You can kind of tackle this in a separate way or a different way, however you'd like to, but try to keep the same voice as we go as a student team. And so, man, I love working on a team. Team is huge for our student team. We have 9 on staff, and we're fully staffed. We're down a member or 2 at the moment, as a lot of teams are at the moment. But yeah, it's incredible, man. And when it comes to specifically Midtown is the campus that I'm at, more closer to downtown. When we talk about my ministry, we talk about my students. My students are all over the place, very diverse, and that can go from racially to finances. I've got students that are living in different worlds in that way, racially. When it comes to ideologies, I've got incredibly conservative to incredibly progressive all over the place. And I've got people that are stepping into our gym that we meet in our church on Wednesday nights, that some of them have known Jesus their whole lives. Some of them have no idea who he is. Others are, I recently had someone who was Muslim come to our service, which is awesome. That kind of stuff happens pretty regularly. And so, man, and that's where I want to be. I want to be where the church is meeting the culture. And I feel like that's happening in Midtown. And when you ask me like, what do your students need to hear right now? It's nothing that they haven't heard from me already.
Yeah.
I would definitely say if it's something they need to hear right now, I should be saying it. And
Yeah.
something that I would always say is, man, the call to give up everything for Jesus is the best decision you could ever make. You were created for it. And another thing I would add on to that is I think we like to like delineate the gospel and what that means for us to just like salvation. And it's like, boom, and then you go. But like, man, when I look at Ephesians 2, it's like we are his workmanship. He's got work for us to do. And not only does he have work for us to do, it's like, that's incredible because God doesn't need us. But he says, I want you to join in my kingdom work. And that's exciting, especially when I think about Gen Z. They're a bunch of brand starters, they're a bunch of entrepreneurs. Like they want to be a part of starting something for the Lord. And I know that excites them to know that the creator of the universe wants to use them.
Yeah, that's great. And you and I both know that Gen Z and even some of the younger millennials are very passionate about building their own brand, quote unquote.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so that's why we see people starting YouTube channels or podcasts or TikToks or whatever that is. And so that's great. And we love that. We encourage that because they have a platform and they have a place to do something. But that can also be dangerous, right? And so, they want to build their platform. They want to do that. And it's an incredible tool, but it's not about us. Right. So what would you have to say? Like maybe you have a student who is trying to build something. Maybe it's their YouTube channel, or maybe it's their TikTok or their Instagram profile. There are some dangers. There's some pros and cons there. And so what would you say to a student who maybe is starting that out? Because I know that we have listeners here that may want to do the same thing, but we want to do that in a healthy way, right?
Yeah, definitely. When you talk about starting your own brand and things of that nature, like inherently, it's not the worst thing in the world, right? But with anything that we have that is a part of our lives, man, if you are an incredible athlete, if you have skills and abilities in the workplace, like you've got great leadership skills or interpersonal skills and things of that nature, literally anything that is about us, we should be putting under the authority of Jesus, right? And so even with us starting a brand, like I was recently went to the Q Ideas conference in Nashville, and one of my good friends was speaking at it, and I got to meet a lot of people who have some successful brands. But man, there wasn't a question for me of, man, is this really all about them?
Right.
I mean, man, there were people that you wouldn't have guessed. I met people that I was like, oh, shoot, like you love Jesus. And now that I'm looking at your stuff, I'm like, oh, of course they love Jesus. And they're using this brand that they've built for his glory to attack. I don't want to say attack, but to encounter the culture in a lot of different ways. And so with students, with millennials and with all the other generations involved, man, building anything can be something that can obviously be selfish. You want to get your name out there and things of that nature, but putting it under the authority under the idea of this is going to be honoring to the Lord, and I ultimately want my integrity, my character to point to him. I think that's possible. I think that, anytime that I've encountered a lot of very creative people, and especially in the Christian space, man, I don't hear a lot of like, man, I'm just trying to get my name out there. But and whenever they see something beautiful that's not necessarily theirs, they don't go, wow, that is just so arrogant. They go, wow, that is so beautiful. And that speaks to how creative and wonderful our God is.
Right.
And I feel like we should approach it with anything that we have that could build a brand.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned a second ago too, hey, you are God's workmanship, or you're his handiwork or whatever. So we've got some work to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw God put Adam to work, right at the very beginning of creation. And so when it comes to working with students or telling students, hey, we've got some work to do, what does that look like for them? Because I know a lot of students who may hear work and they're like, wait, I've already got a job, or I don't want a job. And it's not quite that. But what does that look like, on a daily basis for a student?
Yeah, man. That's a really it's a good question to ask that ends up being pretty particular to each student.
Right.
But what I would say in that is that work does not just look like how we've sold work to be. Almost like it's this monotonous, you have to do it kind of thing. Man, when I think of work and I think of it from a biblical perspective, it's like this thing that we get to do. Like
Yeah.
the Lord has, I get excited about this. Like I get pumped. I get pumped about a God who does not need us at all, but has laid out opportunities for just to jump in spaces. I'm actually reading Garden City by John Mark Comer at the moment, towards the end of it. And a great book on work and rest and just this idea of maybe what the call of Genesis really was to us in working. I think we've set apart like pastoral ministry as like this thing that's like, that's the thing where you get a calling for, right?
Right.
And I would say 100%. You know what you also get a calling for? To be an athlete,
Yeah.
to be an accountant, to be as my roommate is, to be an Air Force pilot, who is right now serving so many people in our country and across the world. Like, man, there is a calling that is instilled in each of us where the Lord is going to line up our passions and the things that he's gifted us with to align into the workspace. And if we really only believe that God is really going to fully move in pastoral ministry only and only in the church, man, we're missing it. And we're also limiting God and how he can work. And so when I look at students and I see their different gifts and abilities, and I see their different personalities and the different spheres of influence they have, from the homeschooler who only maybe knows, who's only friends with his neighbors, to, the football player and baseball player who's got a ton of influence at his school. Like, man, don't limit how God can work in those spaces, and that you should put yourself in a position of work can look like you really, man, putting yourself out there to talk to your friends about Jesus, to invite them into what the Lord is doing. And then also, man, God is a God of excellence. God is a God of excellence, and he loves for us to do things to the best of our ability. And so with whatever gifts and abilities he's given us, man, don't be half-hearted in that. Don't waste those gifts. The Lord can use that for him.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, tell me about, your experience in the church growing up. What did that look like for you?
Oh man, I'll try to tell this as shortly as possible. I tell people I grew up going to church, but not necessarily in a church home to some extent. What I would say is that there was a snippet there where I grew up going to an Episcopal church, very liturgical, traditional, things of that nature. I couldn't stand church, could not stand it. I really couldn't stand it. And even at a young age, man, I would have considered myself an agnostic, really didn't see the point in it all. And for a bit there, we didn't go to church. And how I ended up going back to church was like late middle school into high school. My sister invited me to this youth group, and she was like, they got dodgeball. And I was like, sick, I'm there. Love me some dodgeball. I think I'm still a student at heart. And man, with all of the different things that I was struggling with in my life, I met some people that really loved me right where I was at, and welcomed me in. And especially, I mean, my favorite thing was that I was just seen for who I was and was taken in and invested in. I wasn't just, a guy that they said hi at the door at and then bye, as I walked out.
Right.
I was a person that they saw value in and really invested in. And so when I think of like my time in church youth ministry, man, I look at my time in youth ministry and I'm incredibly thankful because I had a youth pastor, especially in my high school years. I had a youth pastor that invested heavily in me, that when I was struggling with questions of the Lord, when I say I was agnostic, like I really was struggling with, those big apologetics type questions. Whether that have to do with, just like, even like, man, how does something like creation work into all of this, and kind of like those very big ethereal science questions to just simply like philosophical questions, why does God allow, evil, all those
Yeah.
typical questions that I was wrestling with, and all of those things. And I was not met with shame. I was not shamed for asking those questions. I was not belittled. I wasn't, just shoot off. Man, I had people go, man, those are hard questions. I would love to walk with you in that. And even sometimes they said, I don't know. And that's okay. But they really did not see me lesser. They treated me like I was a person and saw a ton of value in me, man. And before I ever knew Jesus, man, I was so shy. I was so shy, and I was, I was a loner and all of these things, man. And I don't say this lightly because I don't want to belittle. Like, I don't think that like, hey, God's just going to make everybody an extrovert, because I need my time alone too. But man, God really instilled a passion in me for Him, that He started to give me leadership in a lot of different realms, in the Christian spaces, and really use that to like kind of bring me out of school. Dude, I can talk to anybody now. And I think it all starts with my biggest thing. I love connecting people, and I see that part of me is because I was the kid that needed someone to go out and to get me connected, to jump out and invest in me and see value in me. And so that's what I think of when I think of growing up.
That's awesome. So tell me about those experiences that you had to lead, and how did those shape you?
Yeah. So it came in the church and then kind of out as well. So my youth pastor in high school, Matt Moore, was that guy who would hit me up. He goes, "What do you think about this?" Like, he would always ask me questions about what we were doing in the student ministry, which I thought was the most incredible thing ever. Now, to us, if you're a student pastor, oh my gosh, like that is not hard. Like that is not hard at all, because you could ask people what they think and they could go, well, I think maybe we should do this. And then you go, I'll be honest, that's terrible. But they feel empowered because you asked them, and they feel like they have an investment there. Something so simple. I got to do something as simple as like lead a game, or, like we would always do Survivor, which is hilarious now that I think of it. But every spring, and I think that church still does that. But like every spring we would do Survivor, and I was like a tribe leader or something like that. It was small things where I was being invested in specifically by Matt, but then he was bringing me into what he was doing and made me feel like I had ownership. Like this isn't just something that I go to and that it's just like fun for me. Like, I'm invested. Like, I get to pour into this thing. And then outside of the church, I got really, really involved in FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. In high school, like directly after I would say, like, I gave my life to the Lord. Like, I remember asking about FCA a ton because I was just trying to get involved in things as a freshman who still had a chili bowl haircut. And I want to see that picture. Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible. I call it a chili bowl. It was more like a helmet. Like, that thing was going to protect me from blunt force trauma. No, but I just got really involved. They made me a leader as a freshman, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I remember the first time I was just like sitting there with my notes like glued to my face. Like, this is what I'm supposed to say, kind of thing. But man, that grew me so much. And a bunch of my friends were leaders with me, and I was just given opportunity after opportunity to speak. I was given opportunity to invite others in, to like think critically about like, man, how do we make this a space where people can grow, they can be discipled? Man, how do we make this a space that literally anybody could walk into? And it grew me immensely. Like, I look at those times so formative, and in all of that, when I think of like the leadership roles that I was given, it wasn't just like, hey, take this, and then I was just kind of left to my own devices. Like, good luck. Like, man, I had people investing in me who had my back, who empowered me. But when I failed, they were like, hey, that's totally fine. There's so much grace here. And honestly, I'm going to kind of take the rap for that, because I've got you. You're safe here, and I'm going to give you room to grow. It's a lesson that I try to take with my students now. Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, when I say we are all the church of now, what does that mean to you? Yeah, this is good. This is the name of the podcast. I shouldn't be. They would ask the question. I think this is actually a big conversation that I've been having with my students, and we're having across our student ministry. I think we would love to come up with every reason in the world to push off obedience to go and make disciples. I really believe that. And I say that as a person that's done it. Like, love others, go and tell his name, like the Great Commission. We see that at the end of Matthew and we go, man, that is such a great call. And that is our commission, right? We're to go and make disciples of all nations, baptize them in the name of the whole thing.
Right.
And Jesus has this authority to say, go. And he means like right now. Yeah. And I think, but what about, like we would love, Jesus gives multiple examples of like people who like come up and it's like, Jesus, I want to follow you. And he goes, okay, but you're going to have to give up this.
Right.
And they're like, oh shoot, like you want that too, huh? Yeah, sorry. I guess I got to wait a little bit before the Lord could use me in that way. Like, and he even says some stuff that we would look at and go, you got to hate your mother and your father. Like, that's really intense language. And I don't think that he's literally saying like, you need to hate your mother and father, but what he's saying is in comparison, like you've got to value me over everything. And so all of the different things that you would like to say get in your way of, following me and doing what I've called you to, like that literally just hits the wayside. Like nothing else matters. Like you're called to do this right now. I think we would love for, the Great Commission to say, hey, when you're a fully grown, mature adult, then you go and all of your finances are in good shape and you feel like you're stable where you're at, then go and make disciples. He's literally saying like, no, you're my church. You're supposed to represent, you're supposed to be a witness to me. Don't worry, the helper's coming. He's going to be with you. And you're supposed to go now. Right now, there's no qualifier. I think we would really love it if there was a qualifier because then we would know when we're supposed to go do it. But even when there is so many things that could be going on in our plate, maybe we need to clear off our plate a little bit. If we don't have time, if we don't feel like we have the capacity to go and be the church, because the church does not have, man, there should be a sense of urgency. And I don't mean that we should feel rushed, like if we're discipling people and they're like, dang it, I've talked to them about the gospel at least 3 times and they haven't given their life to the Lord yet. I don't think it's that easy, man. We're dealing with people. I think of myself and I didn't like hear the gospel and go, oh man, they're just like, some people it does. Awesome. But an investment takes time. And so even with that in mind, we should be going now, right? Like when I think of the church of now, I think of the amount of students that I see every single week, the amount of young adults in our church community, the congregants of our church as a whole, and I see just a lack of hope. There are people walking around without hope. And when I'm talking about what we've been talking about with our student ministry, a big thing that we've been pushing, which is kind of our vision series that we're starting off with, is the tagline of why we do what we do. Man, we are leading students towards a lifetime of following Jesus. I think when we think of eternity with the Lord, we very naturally just go to like, okay, cool, when I die, then I get eternity with Jesus. It's like, no. When you say you are following him, you have literally given up yourself. You're going to start picking up the cross daily and following him. Oh, shoot, lifetime started today, baby. Like eternity started today. You get to walk with him right now. You get to experience the hope and peace of the foundation under your life of Jesus Christ. It's good news. It's such good news. Like, I'm so glad we're the church of the now. Like, I'm glad that there's not some far off future. That's when the Lord's really going to use me. He wants to use me in my weakness and in my strength right now. I get excited about it. I get pumped about it. I just want everybody to understand it. I do. Like, the church is right now, and people need you to be investing in their life. People need you to be a witness of literally the thing that we would say is not just an answer, is the solution. Like, is the answer. You were created for him to glorify him with your whole life. And it's not just a product. Like, it's not another thing that just happens to be better than all the other things we could throw out. Like, it's everything. Like, Jesus Christ being glorified in your life is everything that you were made for.
I love that.
Yeah, you give me excited, man. I get pumped.
That's one of my favorite answers I've gotten to that question.
Oh, praise God. That's awesome.
That's amazing. And I one of the reasons it's one of my favorite is I see your passion, right? And not that my other guests or the other guests on the podcast haven't had that, but
you hear that, other guests?
I see your passion, and I know you, right? I know who you are. I know what that looks like for you to lead students. I was a high school kid when I met you, so and a very broken high school kid. when I met you. And so I always appreciated your influence there. Love that. Love your response there.
I
So,
mean, even with what you're saying there, Matt, like when you say like, man, I met you in your life when you were broken, bro, I had so much going on in my life.
yeah.
Like seriously, like I had so many pieces of me that I wasn't even letting the Lord into.
Yeah.
So many broken pieces of me, and he's still using me, right? Like,
yeah.
and so I just really think about all of the reasons that we could come up with of why we can't be used, why now is not really now. But like once I get all my stuff together, and I don't try to prop myself up in that. It's just that the Lord he makes it very clear through Paul, like, dude, in my weakness, I'm strong, because I'm pointing to how dependent I am on the Lord. The fact that I had any kind of influence on your life, that's Jesus. That is 100% him. That's him. That's not me, you know?
Yeah.
I've just put that out there.
Yeah. And you weren't even, I don't know our age difference, but you weren't even that much older. I'm 23, gonna be 24 in November.
I'll be 27 in October. So we're like 3 years difference.
Okay.
Which makes
And
sense.
so
I was a sophomore going into junior year.
Yes.
Of college.
That's what I was thinking too. And so, I think one of our biggest age demographics that listen to this podcast is that 18 to 25. Obviously it's like high school to 25 age. And so there are people that listen to this that are in college that think, hey, I'm not the church, right? Or I don't have a place. And maybe it's because of the same thing that you just said, as you feel broken, you feel like you can't make a difference. But even in that, you can. And it's not because of you, but because of God. And you said yes, right? So that's great. So you have students in your youth group that may feel like they're not a part of the church, or maybe they feel like they are a part of the church of the future. Maybe somebody's told them that. I've heard people say that before. And so what would you say to a student in your youth group, or just generically, students in general, that feel like they don't have a place in the church now, but they've got to wait for the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's kind of along the same lines of a little bit of what we're talking about. I guess it's just a progression of thought. Man, I think I point to the multitude of people that we see in Scripture besides Jesus that by our standards should have probably been told to wait until they were older or more seasoned, or had covered up kind of the weaker parts of themselves a little bit better, that were used specifically in their weakness for his glory. Like, I mean, there are so many people that we look at as like, oh, they had to be at least 30 or 40. And then we like look up how old they are and they're like, oh, they were in their teens. Oh, shoot.
Like all the disciples.
Oh, man, like they were trusted with this. Oh my gosh. Yeah, his kingdom doesn't work how we think it should. It doesn't work by our cultural standards by any means, which is, man, the upside down nature of our kingdom, right? Of the kingdom of the Lord. I would say to you, you have influence, personality, gifts that the Lord can use right now in whatever stage of life that you are in, 100%. So like for me, the thing that I always put out there, especially to students, when I hear or I can sense, because they don't usually say it anymore, but when I sense that they're like, man, I'm too young for that. Like I've got so many other things going on. I'm too young for the Lord to use me. Dude, the guy that was primarily preaching the gospel to me in 8th grade was my age.
Yeah.
He was my age, passionate about the word. His name was Drew Williams. And I'll share his name. I'll remember his name forever. To be honest with you, I haven't kept up with Drew in a while. But Drew was passionate about God's word. He knew the gospel and he lived it. I mean, highest integrity, such a passion for those that did not know him to know him. Just a lover of people. He didn't see people as a project, man. He just loved people. And he was just so certain, man, the exact same truth that I believe for myself, I believe it for you too. You were created for the Lord. And he was my age. And so when I meet middle school students, when I meet high school students that have all of this influence that they don't think about, or just simply the fact that they have the opportunity, they have someone in their life that they can be living for. living for the fact that they can, they can live for Jesus and show his love in their family, at their part-time job, in their school, on their sports team, and their extracurricular clubs, like in a stranger they meet off the street, man. Like it honestly, I get so like, oh, it grieves me that you think that the Lord can't use you.
Yeah.
Because I look at Drew Williams and I don't think that that's the limit, that, okay, like 14 is the minimum. Like you can't go younger than that. Like, man, there are so many opportunities for you to be used. The church needs you. The church needs you right now. It doesn't just need more pastors. It needs all the followers of God to take on the responsibility. Like when I look at being in a pastoral position, especially at a campus, specifically, we've got a small staff that oversees our campus as a whole. And so I naturally, I oversee a lot of different aspects of our church, because we all do, right? We all carry a bunch of different ways. It's the fun life of campus life, which I love, honestly. I see so many different aspects of the church, and all that I think all the time is that I'm not enough. And I don't mean that in a degrading way. I mean that I cannot be the church wholeheartedly, just me.
Right.
Our pastoral staff cannot keep it up. Man, every single person, and it's why I really appreciated what John Mark Comer has to say in Garden City. It's like, Lord, he's going to use everyone. The same call to make more of Jesus, to go and disciple, to love people, to love God and love people, to be a witness and an ambassador to his name. That's for every single person. And so when I think of this whole idea of church of the future, like that, just, I don't think it is a bad thing for us to think of the future and get vision for what the church will look like even in the future. That's not a terrible thing at all. But if we miss what he's doing right now, and we just continually we can come up with every excuse of why we could continue to wait for the Lord to really move. I think he wants to move right now. And he needs you. He needs whoever's listening to this. I've never been on a podcast before, so take this as you will. Everybody who's listening, he needs you. Your gifts, your abilities, even if you have belittled those gifts because they don't look like the really cool ones on a platform and on a stage. Like, okay, the fact that I get to speak regularly, I tell people constantly, it's like, man, the Lord's using me in my weakness. I used to not be able to stand up in front of people.
Yeah.
Cool that he uses me in that way. But I look at especially on our staff, I look at our admins, I look at our behind the scenes worker, and none of what we do could happen without them. They are doing the exact same work that I am doing. And they have the exact same call on their life that I do to make more of Jesus. Yep. And so I can't buy into the church of the future. That's not a church that I want to be a part of, but it's not a church that I'm a part of. I'm a part of a church that has an impact, a direct implication on our life right now, and that wants to find more and more people that would be faithful to what the Lord's called us to.
That's great. He wants us to be a part of it now. We don't have to wait. Yep. And one of the things that I've been learning through this podcast, we've been focusing a lot on students, and that's the main conversation we have when we have different guests on here with students, young adults, kids. But what I've discovered and what I've been learning through some other guests is, there are older generations that feel like they're the church of the past. And so, a lot of people have been told they're the church of the future, but a lot of the older ones have been saying, hey, I'm the church of the past. I don't have a place. Maybe my work is done, you take over or whatever. And so we have, from what I believe and what I've been saying, 5 generations in the church right now. And so we all have to work together, right? And so how do we get all of these generations to realize that we are the church of now?
Yeah, I would say, I think I've got 2 lines of thought. So I'll tackle the first one, especially with what you just said of the church of the past. If there is one thing that I would desire for all of the older generations in the church, is that you would mentor. Yeah. Please, we need you. Oh, we need you so desperately. We need you so desperately. I would not even be close to where I'm at right now in my walk with the Lord if I didn't have people that poured into my life. Yeah, I would just say that, man, you are definitely not the church of the past. We have so much to learn from you. Empty nesters, even just 30 with some kids, like all of you, we desperately need you to instill and come alongside people and teach them by example of action and word of what it looks like to faithfully follow Jesus. We need to see it more and more. And I can point to the younger generations, and I know they need it. And so that's what I put out there. You're definitely not the church of the past. Yeah, our church has an eternal component to it. There's no way, there's no church of the past in terms of the kingdom that the Lord is building. The other thing that I would say, just for like what we can do to really empower people, is what I think of. We got to empower people, and we got to empower them by giving them more than one way to serve. Yeah. I think we've like delineated in the church, especially, or just in Christian ministry as a whole, that there's like one way, and that's how to do it. I mean, I think first off, the reason that people believe that they can't be used is because we're not giving them opportunities. Like we're just straight up not giving them opportunities to serve. And sometimes we say that because they're not old enough yet. Like we only have like spaces for the serve if they're old enough or mature enough, whatever. Yeah. Or it's pastors like myself who are micromanagers and want to be involved in every single aspect of the church. And so there's no room for you to ask other people to serve. There's no room for you to empower others to be a part of things. And to be honest with you, that's a weakness of mine. I like to have control over a lot of things. And I have had to learn, oh my gosh, in my time in ministry, that I am being a detriment to one, the ministry as a whole. It can't grow in excellence just based off of my abilities and my vision for things. Like the church is so global and so comprehensive, and so many other people should be involved. But even past that, I'm taking away exactly what I was given when I was a student: opportunities to be empowered and to be given opportunities to like step up and lead and grow. But I would say, and I was actually having this conversation with another youth pastor in town recently, if we give opportunities to serve and they're only like one track, like they literally only look like one thing that you can do, we need to give more opportunities to encounter people in the vast expression of gifts that we all have. Like, I think we have delineated to like, the only people at a lot of churches that we let people serve in is kids ministry. And that's almost because we've delineated kids ministry to be like this babysitting service, which it is not at all. I did not get the benefit from growing up in kids ministry. And I see the benefit of people that have grown up in kids ministry that have a lot more biblical knowledge than when I started off with, when I started knowing Jesus. So you can throw that somewhere else. Like, even if they did not come to salvation in kids ministry, when they have come to salvation, they are starting off with so much biblical knowledge because that foundation has been laid for them. Right. And I even think of specifically, it's hard for me not to think of internships, because I'm pretty sure, Matt, you've done an internship, and I have as well. Yeah. Like in student ministry, bro, what internship means usually in student ministry is grunt work. That's exactly what it means. It means you're rearranging the closet, and you're going to a lot of Walmarts and Targets to get all the supplies for camp and all of that stuff. And every now and then, you'll get the opportunity to maybe lead a game or something along those lines. But, what if behind the scenes, man, some people thrive in that. Like, they're like, I'm a behind the scenes dude. This gives me life. Awesome. Incredible. But man, if you're going to take on an internship, you're taking on an opportunity to empower and grow somebody to be a minister in the next generation. And so what if that's not for them, But if you got to know someone, you see their gifts. Like, Matt, when I think of you, man, you're talented in a lot of ways. You're a great communicator, and also you're really talented in what you're kind of living out here with this podcast, right? You're big on the production and media side of things. Like, I remember you're a video guy and a photographer and all of these different things. Like, man, imagine if you were never given room to flourish with that. Like, think of all the people that are tech savvy. Think of all the people that are just relationally I call them, it sounds like negative, relational monsters. Like, they can't help but build great relationships with people. Like, people get to know them for the first time and they're like, I love this person. Like, man, put them in a position where they're getting people connected then. Like, what if they are worship people? What if they are, man, maybe they are an administration person? Like, give them opportunities to work through logistics and stuff like that. Some people that gives them life. That sounds horrible to me, but but some people it looks like that, maybe it is kids ministry, but it's not just that you're dumping it off on them as a babysitting service, but they have a passion and a patience and a grace to walk alongside kids and show them and give them peace, and also to serve families by giving them opportunities for families to go and be a part of service and really care about their children. And I just think when we, as the church, and I'm talking more towards pastors here, but I would even talk towards leadership in general when it comes to ministries, get to know people, see where their gifts are at. Your ministry, your church, the kingdom of God will benefit from us seeing where people's gifts are at and letting them flourish, because they are going to take it way farther than you're going to be able to pour into them. Matt, I bet money when people were allowing you to giving you opportunities with media and different things like that and speaking, they maybe didn't have any idea the kind of potential that you were going to step into that is far more than what they expected when they were pouring into you, but it's benefiting the kingdom. And that's a really good thing. So, man, we should just stop having a one-track mind of how the Lord can use us. I think is like a very general thing for like a lot of what we've said today.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for your words there. Really appreciate that. And I want to push back a little bit. We've been talking about the internship, not push back against you, push back against some people.
Do it. Come on.
I've always heard, and I've actually never had this experience as an intern. I've interned at 3 different places. And, the internship idea, it used to be, all right, if you're going to be an intern here, you are cleaning the closet, you are, doing the paperwork, or you're doing things that I don't want to do kind of mindset. I've always pushed back against that because the internships that I've had have been very hands-on for me. And so, one of my internships, I went, and it was a very holistic internship, but I guess I technically went for like student ministry and I guess preaching. And so that's what I went for. But we also did things like teach the ladies Bible study in the middle of the week.
Let's go.
It was like 60, 70-year-old women that were at this Bible study. And there was also, we taught the kids, and we did preach, and we did go to people's house, and we did a lot of different things.
Praise God.
And so I've never had an intern. I'm hoping that we will next year. We'll see what happens there. Yeah. But I want the same experience that I had to be theirs. And so if I have an intern, they're not just going to be cleaning the closet. If we are cleaning the closet, I'm there, right? I'm there helping them. Right. And also,
that is so big.
And they need to be in staff meetings. They need to know, okay, we're planning this event. Hey, we're spending 2 hours in our administrator's office. You're there, you're figuring out how this works. You need to know how this works, because if we say, hey, you're going to clean out a closet now because you're not ready to do this, we're saying that they are the church of the future. And it also doesn't help. Like, it doesn't make any sense for us to tell them, hey, you're only good enough as an intern to be a closet cleaner. Right. We're not growing them. And so I didn't know that we were going to have an intern conversation today, but that's just always something I've been passionate about too.
I think it's like the greatest example of just like a very hands-on opportunity to pour into somebody. I will say, I'm with you. I've had great internship opportunities. I think a lot of people think of internships as the grunt work. I think even with that, that apparently the sun's going down. I think even with that, what I've experienced, and even the conversation I had with this other youth pastor, is they asked me, because I had an internship experience that was very draining. And to be honest, in my stage of life and the other things that I was balancing, it was too much. And he said, man, what would you say to those? I don't want my internships. I don't want my interns to burn out. I said, man, their capacity is going to lengthen when they're doing something they're passionate about, period. And so I would say specifically, I don't think it always looks like the grunt work. And I appreciate you pushing back on that, because I didn't have all of those experiences with that. I think the thing that I would push much harder is the other aspect of that is like, man, give them something that they can own and flourish with. Yeah. Because they may just pursue that way farther than the internship will go. That's really good.
Yeah. I had an internship with a church that met in a YMCA, and we had like 30 people in our church, and like the guy that is the minister there, he's still a mentor, and there, I mean, every day, every Sunday we come in, we got to roll the chairs into the room, we've got to set them out, we got to get the screen set up, like there was grunt work there, but it wasn't like, hey, you're the intern, you got to do it. It was, hey, we're doing this because, I mean, people are coming, like they're coming to hear about God. And so
100%. Yeah. And coming alongside somebody in that, I do that every single week. I set up my space in the gym every single week. I mean, it's natural. It's a part of ministry. I think it does say a lot when you do it with them.
Yeah, it does, for sure. For sure. Well, sweet. Hey, I want to ask you this question. What is your best or your funniest ministry story?
Okay. Can I share two? I'll share a really short one from student ministry, and then I'll share another one that I think is just funny. The first one has to do with one of my students, Noah. Incredible dude. He's just, but yeah, unpredictable to say the least. And we had a Sunday specifically honoring our seniors, just kind of praying over them. And I had Noah, who's just very much a leader in our student ministry. He's planning on going to YWAM in Kona for their discipleship school, which is awesome. And he went to the front of the stage, and I remember specifically, I was like, hey, here's some note cards so you can kind of write down what you want to say, and go from there with that. And I see him before service, and he's practicing it again, and I hear like this like hard like noise when he's changing through his things. I'm like, what the? I was like, what is it? I was like, dude, where are your note cards? He goes, oh, I lost them. So I wrote all of my notes on floppy disks.
What?
He had gotten a stack of floppy disks and was rummaging through them for his
That's amazing.
On behalf of the senior. I just had to highlight it. I think he got it from his dad, because I think his dad like where he has that. It was just the funniest, most unpredictable, but so on brand Noah thing ever.
Oh,
it was just, oh gosh, it was wonderful. I just had to highlight it. I was like, guys, this is no he's the floppy disk guy. The other
I was wondering where he got this floppy disk from.
Yeah, I have no idea. Honestly, it's probably the guy, but it was very, very funny. Probably the other thing I would say, and this is from when I'll mention this story. I'm very happy and have a girlfriend at this point. I was single when I worked at my last church in Knoxville, and I was a resident. I didn't have any responsibilities on Sundays, and so I would help out in leading worship with our worship team. There were 3 worship teams across our campus, and and so I'll just give the context of like, from what a lot of people see when they see a guy like me just leading on stage or whatever, is they just see a Christian leader of some sort who doesn't have a ring on his finger. And how our services would work, we'd leave 4 songs in the front, and then one of the rooms out of the 3 would catch up to the live service happening in the other room. And so we would step out after worship, go out, and we were in a hallway next to the room that is being about to be simulcasted to. A girl steps out of service and like, I want to say ambushed me as I come out of the green room. And she is, and this is just a very interesting, that she was shaking and she just hands me her number.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, hey, I'm Josh. Nice to meet you. What's your name? Insert name here. And I was like, hey, I bet this took a lot for you to do this. And so I really appreciate your boldness. I would hate for you to miss service. Can you please go back in?
Oh my gosh.
She's like, yeah. She steps in, and then I bring it back to the rest of the worship team and our worship pastor, Aaron. She had been leading with me, and I put it down on the table, and she goes, what? She's like, you're sticking with me. I'm protecting you from here on out. It was just one of those things where I was like, man, this girl didn't even know my name. Like, I was just like, one of the most uncomfortable ministry things I've ever experienced in my whole life. And I'm very glad that I have not dealt with that since then. And I it's just so funny because they have no idea about me. Like, they have no idea who I am and all that stuff. They just see somebody and go for it. But yeah, I would say those two stories are ones that I will be talking about knowing that floppy disk for a long time.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Both of those are great. Hey, one more thing. If you had one more thing to say to our audience, what is it?
Wow. Yeah. I would say this is something that I am feeling just kind of deep in my bones right now for the church. I know this season has been full of a lot of frustration and disappointment. And even with, things like the Delta variant coming back up, you're like, man, how are we here again? I understand that frustration because I felt it in some ways too. I haven't had a single year of student ministry since I've been in Little Rock that hasn't been impacted by COVID. And it's a lot. But what I would say to you is that even in the midst of that, our God is still our hope and our strength and our refuge. And he also still has a call for us to go and bring that hope to others, to speak of his name. There are so many people. Think of the position that you're in, Christians, right now, that you have a hope and refuge, and think of all the people that do not have it. We should still, even in the midst of the disappointment and frustration, I promise you, when the Lord is using you and you step into how he could use you, you will be blessed. You will feel so much purpose in that. There are people that need to know his name, even in the midst of this. So I would encourage you, please don't hold in. Please be thinking outward, even in the midst of this season. It's worth it. And the Lord has so much for you in that. He'll bless you through it.
I agree. Love that. Josh, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation.
Thank you, dude. Thanks so much for having me.
It's always good to catch up. And so always good to have conversation together. Josh, thanks for being on the podcast, man. Really appreciate you.
Dude, thanks so much for having me, brother.
Just a great conversation. See you later.
Awesome. Sounds good.